Emile pretended to get food poisoning at my party, sent me fake hospital bills. I checked the dates and found her dining at a restaurant the entire time. Can you imagine being so desperate to undermine someone that you'd fake an illness, fabricate hospital bills, and accuse them of poisoning you? Because that's exactly what my mother-in-law did to me, and let me tell you, it almost broke me. My husband, Mark, and I have been married for almost 8 years, and we have 2 amazing kids, Lily and Max. But my relationship with his mom, Deborah? Oh, that's been a whole other story. From day one, it felt like I just wasn't good enough. Not educated enough, despite my master's degree. Not from a good family, even though my parents worked their backsides off. And the biggest crime? I couldn't cook like she could. See, cooking is Deborah's absolute pride and joy. She throws these elaborate dinner parties, whipping up gourmet meals that would make a 5-star chef jealous. Me? I grew up with working parents and simple, wholesome food. I've definitely upped my cooking game over the years, but I'm no culinary genius. And Deborah never let me forget it. For years, I just smiled through her passive-aggressive jabs about my parenting, my career choices, my housekeeping. I'd send thank you notes for all the better versions of things she'd unsolicitedly gift us, because what we had apparently wasn't up to par. Mark, bless his heart, tried to defend me, but he was always caught in the middle, and I never wanted to force him to choose. Then came last month. Mark and I decided to host a big family gathering to celebrate his dad, John's, retirement. We invited about 20 people, Mark's parents, his sister Emma and her family, and some close friends. I spent days planning, cooking, and preparing. I really wanted it to be special. Initially, everything was going great. The house was buzzing with laughter. The food was ready on time. Even Deborah seemed to be in good spirits. She, of course, brought an uninvited side dish, some fancy salad with ingredients I couldn't even pronounce, but honestly, I didn't mind. During dinner, the compliments were flowing. John loved the chicken, Emma raved about the rolls, and friends were practically begging for my cake recipe. I felt this surge of pride, like yes, I did it. But then I looked at Deborah. She was barely touching her food, just moving it around her plate with this look of utter disgust. She'd take these tiny bites, grimacing, as if she was forcing down poison. I tried to ignore it, telling myself, typical Deborah. But then she started with the audible comments. The chicken's a bit dry, isn't it? She'd announced to no one in particular. And I find the vegetables quite undercooked. Mark shot me sympathetic glances, but I just smiled and kept eating, my face burning. About an hour later, while everyone was enjoying coffee and dessert, Deborah suddenly clutched her stomach. She let out this dramatic moan, and the entire conversation just died. All eyes turned to her as she announced she didn't feel well, claiming something wasn't cooked properly. My face was on fire. Mark rushed to her side. Between groans, Deborah explained she was nauseous, had terrible stomach cramps, and dramatically declared she needed hospital attention. John, with a weary sigh, stood up to take her. Mark offered to drive them, but Deborah, ever the martyr, insisted he stay and host. No need to ruin everyone's evening just because I've been poisoned, she said, shooting me a pointed glare. As they left, she turned back to the group, a sickly sweet smile on her face. Everyone else's stomachs are probably stronger than mine, she remarked. So please, enjoy the rest of the food. She practically spat the word food, as if I'd served them garbage. The party mood was instantly shattered. People started making excuses to leave early, probably wondering if they'd be next to fall victim to my supposedly toxic cooking. Emma tried to reassure me, saying no one believed Deborah's performance, but I saw the doubt in some eyes as they cautiously finished their desserts. Mark was mortified, apologizing repeatedly for his mother's behavior. He called John several times throughout the evening, who kept saying they were still waiting at the hospital. By the time the last guest left, I was fighting back tears of sheer humiliation and anger. The next morning, Mark called his parents. John said Deborah had been treated for food poisoning and released late that night. She was resting but would be fine. When Mark pressed for specifics, John was vague, mumbling about contaminated food and dehydration. I was instantly suspicious. I had eaten the exact same food, as had everyone else, with no issues. I'm meticulous with food prep, especially using a meat thermometer for chicken. But Deborah had planted seeds of doubt, not just in our guests' minds, but in mine too. 3 days later, I got an email from Deborah. The subject line, hospital bills. She wrote in excruciating detail about how she'd suffered terribly from my negligent cooking and had been diagnosed with severe food poisoning. Attached were scanned hospital bills totaling $2,870. And then, the kicker. She stated that since I was responsible for her illness, I should pay them. I was stunned. Not only was she publicly blaming me for supposedly poisoning her, but she was demanding nearly $3,000. Mark and I are not wealthy, and an expense like that would seriously strain our finances. I forwarded the email to Mark, and he immediately called his mother. From his side of the conversation, it was clear Deborah was not backing down. She insisted my cooking had made her seriously ill, that doctors had confirmed food poisoning, and that I should pay. When Mark pointed out that no one else got sick, she actually claimed she had a sensitive stomach and everyone else was probably just hiding their symptoms to spare my feelings. The call ended with Mark saying he needed time to think. He looked utterly exhausted. While he believed my food was properly prepared, he was genuinely worried about his mother's health and those bills. He even suggested we might just pay to keep the peace and move on. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Pay $2,870 for something that wasn't my fault? Admit guilt for something I didn't do? No, this wasn't just about money. This was Deborah's ongoing campaign to undermine me, to make me feel small. Paying would validate her lies and set a terrifying precedent for future manipulation. My blood ran cold at the thought. That night, something about the hospital bills felt off. The formatting looked strange, some medical codes seemed incorrect, and the hospital logo seemed a little different from what I remembered. I decided to investigate. I called the hospital listed on the bills and eventually reached someone in billing who confirmed my suspicions. They had no record of Deborah being admitted or treated on that date. In fact, no record of her visiting the emergency room at all that month. But I needed more. On a hunch, I remembered Deborah loved an upscale restaurant near that hospital. I called, pretending I wanted to surprise my mother-in-law by recreating a meal she'd enjoyed there. The hostess confirmed they had a reservation for John and Deborah at almost the exact time they were supposedly rushing to the ER. My jaw practically hit the floor. Deborah hadn't been suffering in a hospital. She'd been enjoying a fancy dinner. I kept digging. One of their friends had even tagged them in a social media photo at that restaurant that very night. There they were, smiling with wine glasses, looking far from someone suffering from severe food poisoning. I showed Mark everything. The hospital's confirmation, the restaurant reservation, and that damning social media photo. He was speechless. Then, furious. He'd been genuinely worried about his mother's health, only to discover it was an elaborate, cruel lie designed to humiliate me and extort money. Mark called his parents immediately, putting them on speakerphone. John answered, and Mark confronted him about the fake hospital visit. John sounded incredibly uncomfortable and evasive, making excuses about misunderstandings and claiming Deborah had felt ill but recovered quickly. When Mark mentioned the restaurant reservation and the photo, there was a long, awkward silence, followed by sounds of a muffled argument in the background. When John returned to the call, his tone had completely changed. He finally admitted they hadn't gone to the hospital, but still insisted Deborah truly felt unwell after dinner. According to him, they went to the restaurant for bland food that wouldn't further upset her stomach. About the fake bills, John claimed ignorance, suggesting Deborah had made a mistake or confused dates. Mark wasn't buying any of it. He demanded to speak with his mother, but John said she was too upset. Mark, his voice firm and steady, stated plainly that we knew exactly what happened. Deborah faked an illness to embarrass me, left our party for a fancy restaurant, then fabricated medical bills to extort money. He declared we wouldn't pay a single dime, and that we would limit contact until Deborah gave a sincere apology. It was a powerful moment, a true turning point. But it left me wondering, was I wrong to investigate? Should we have just paid the fake bills to keep the peace? For potentially contributing to my mother-in-law's breakdown by refusing to be manipulated anymore? Update 1. Cracks in the facade. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. I was honestly so nervous about sharing such a personal story, but the support and advice I received, it was more than I ever expected. I read every single reply, and it truly meant the world to feel like people were not only listening, but genuinely trying to help. Some of you even shared your own experiences, and that made me feel so much less alone. So, truly, Thank you. I figured it was time for an update and to answer a few questions that came up a lot. Yes, we are absolutely still keeping firm boundaries in place with Deborah. Things are better in the sense that she isn't actively trying to manipulate or guilt us like before, but we're moving slowly and carefully. Trust doesn't just magically reappear overnight, especially after everything that happened. Mark and I both agree that our first priority is keeping our home peaceful and healthy for ourselves and our kids. A few people asked if we were planning to take legal action because of the fake medical bills. That's a totally valid question, and trust me, it was something we seriously considered. What she did was wrong on so many levels, not just morally, but legally too. After talking things through with our lawyer, we decided not to go down the route of pressing fraud charges. It wasn't an easy decision, but at the end of the day, our main goal was to make the behavior stop. Punishing her felt secondary compared to finally getting some honesty and accountability. The fact that she's now in therapy, owning up to what she did, and starting to understand how serious it all was, that counts for something. We're not saying it erases the past, but it's a step in the right direction. Actually, we got some unexpected news just yesterday. Emma, Mark's cousin, called to catch up and ended up telling us something kind of surprising. Apparently, during one of her therapy sessions, Deborah opened up and shared the whole story with her support group. And I mean everything. The fake illness, the staged restaurant incident, the phony hospital bills, all of it. According to Emma, who heard this from John, the group's reaction really took Deborah by surprise. Hearing strangers react with shock, even disgust, seemed to hit her differently than when family members tried to confront her. I guess there's something about hearing people who don't owe you anything say, "Wow, that's seriously messed up." That makes it harder to stay in denial. It's like she finally saw it from the outside looking in. Apparently, that moment really shook her. And honestly, I think that kind of wake-up call was long overdue. On top of that, John mentioned that Deborah's therapist has brought up the idea of doing family therapy, not just general sessions, but specifically focused on the relationship between her and me. The therapist thinks that unless we deal with the deeper stuff between us, whatever caused all this resentment and control, her overall progress might stall. Mark and I haven't decided if we're going to do it yet. We're not against therapy at all, but we're also trying to protect ourselves. The last thing we want is to get sucked back into another round of manipulation under the guise of healing. It's complicated. On one hand, we want to support the progress she's making. On the other, we're still recovering from the emotional whiplash of everything she put us through. We haven't said yes or no yet. We're just giving it time and thinking things through carefully. Now, here's something that really surprised me in a good way. Yesterday, I got a package in the mail. I wasn't expecting anything, and when I saw it was from Deborah, I'll admit I felt a little nervous opening it. But inside was a really thoughtful gift. She sent me a cookbook. Not just any cookbook, though. It was a collection of family recipes that had belonged to Mark's grandmother. Apparently, it's something she's been holding on to for years. Along with the book was a handwritten note. In it, Deborah explained that she had always intended to pass it down to whoever Mark ended up marrying. But because of her issues, yes, she actually used that word, she never followed through. She said she hoped I might find some recipes I'd like and that I'd feel comfortable making them for the family, only if I wanted to, with zero expectations or pressure. That part really stood out to me. It felt like the first time she's ever acknowledged that she made things harder than they needed to be, and that maybe she pushed too much or tried to control things that weren't hers to control. It was a small gesture, but it actually felt meaningful. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal relationship, but that felt like a step forward, a real one. So, that's where things stand for now. Things are still a little uncertain, but they're also calmer than they've been in a long time. We're taking things one day at a time, and we're definitely not letting our guard down completely, but we're also open to the idea that people can change if they're truly willing to do the work. Thanks again to everyone who's followed along and offered support. I'll keep you posted if anything big changes, but for now, we're cautiously optimistic. Update 2. The unlikeliest ally okay. You guys, things took a turn I was not expecting at all. Yesterday started like any other day until I got a call from Emma that left me completely thrown. She sounded pretty upset and said she needed to tell me something right away. Apparently, Patricia, the same friend of Deborah's who originally spread the stalking accusations, has been going around, spinning an even more twisted version of the story. From what Emma said, Patricia has been telling people in their shared social circle that not only did I stalk Deborah, but I also physically threatened her and have been keeping her from seeing her grandchildren purely out of spite. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. That's a huge leap from what Deborah originally claimed. And the idea that people out there believe I'm some kind of threatening, cruel person was honestly sickening. I've done nothing but try to set healthy boundaries, and to see that turned into something so ugly felt like a punch to the gut. Here's where it gets even more unexpected. These rumors ended up reaching Deborah, and instead of letting them stand or quietly agreeing with them, which, to be honest, is what I would have expected a few months ago, she actually defended me. Emma had gone over to her parents' house and overheard part of a phone conversation between Deborah and Patricia. She said Deborah was clearly upset and told Patricia to stop spreading lies. More than that, Deborah actually admitted that she had made up the original stalking story during a period of really bad mental health. According to Emma, Deborah sounded serious, like she really meant it. I couldn't believe it. Deborah admitting fault is rare enough, but doing it to a friend who has been firmly in her corner? That's almost unheard of. Apparently, Patricia didn't take it well. She accused Deborah of being brainwashed by me and said some other dramatic things, but Deborah didn't back down. Emma said she calmly but firmly told Patricia not to call her again unless she was ready to apologize for spreading false stories about her daughter-in-law. Hearing that, I was stunned. So was Mark. We both just kind of sat there for a moment after Emma told us, letting it sink in. It felt like a huge shift, like maybe, just maybe, her therapy is actually starting to make a real difference. And not just surface-level change, but something deeper. Later that evening, something even more surprising happened. Deborah called me directly. That might not sound like a big deal, but trust me, it is. Normally, she only communicates with me through Mark, or in the past, through passive-aggressive gifts or messages. A direct phone call? That's rare. She apologized again. Not just a vague, sorry if I upset you kind of apology, but an actual, detailed one. She said she was sorry for everything, but especially for the stalking accusations. She told me she had been completely embarrassed when she realized I'd caught her lying about being in the hospital and going out to eat while pretending to be ill. She admitted that instead of owning up to it, she panicked and tried to make me out to be the villain to save face with her friends. She actually sounded remorseful. Not defensive, not blaming someone else, just regretful and honestly kind of vulnerable. It's the first time in a long time that I've heard her speak like that. Then she asked if I would be willing to meet her privately. Just the two of us, no Mark, no John, to talk one-on-one, woman to woman, about everything that's happened and whether there's a path forward for our relationship. I was caught off guard. Part of me wanted to say no right away. I mean, I've been burned so many times by her manipulations that it's hard to trust anything. But another part of me, maybe the part that still hopes we can find peace someday, felt like this could be a turning point. So, I told her I'd meet her for coffee later this week at a public cafe. After I hung up, I immediately called Emma to get her thoughts. I trust her judgment more than anyone when it comes to this whole side of the family. She said she was cautiously optimistic, but reminded me to stay alert. As she put it, Deborah's been manipulative for decades, and therapy takes time. One breakthrough doesn't erase a lifetime of patterns. She even offered to come to the cafe and sit a few tables away just to keep an eye on things without Deborah knowing. I was touched by the offer and accepted. It made me feel a little safer about the whole thing. Then today, I got a text message from Patricia. It was short and kind of stiff, more of a PR move than a real apology. But she said she was sorry for any misunderstandings that might have come from things she said about me. It wasn't a full admission or anything close to what I think she owes me, but at least it was something. A tiny step, maybe. So, that's where we are right now. I've got this coffee meeting with Deborah coming up, and I'm feeling a weird mix of hope and anxiety. Part of me wants to believe she's genuinely changing, and that maybe we can finally move past all the hurt and tension. But another part of me knows how easy it would be to fall back into old patterns and how skilled she is at playing the victim when it suits her. I'll definitely update once the meeting happens. I'm trying to stay open-minded, but also grounded. Whatever happens, at least I'll know I gave it a fair shot. Update 3, the raw truth. Okay, deep breath. I met with Deborah at the cafe, just like we planned. Emma came too, though not to join us directly. She sat a few tables away, pretending to work on her laptop. She just wanted to be close by, just in case things got uncomfortable or went sideways. I really, truly appreciated her doing that. It gave me a little sense of comfort walking into what I knew could be a very unpredictable conversation. I got there a few minutes early, but to my surprise, Deborah was already there. And she looked really nervous, more than I'd ever seen her before. She kept folding and unfolding her napkin, fidgeting with her coffee cup, and looking around like she wasn't sure if she should stay. That in itself was unusual. Deborah has always been the type to walk into a room with a sense of control, or at least try to act like she had it. But this was different. She seemed small somehow, and very human. What happened next honestly floored me. I had gone in expecting maybe another half-hearted apology, or even some sort of emotional manipulation. I was mentally prepared for defensiveness, blame-shifting, or maybe even passive-aggressive digs disguised as concern. Instead, Deborah completely broke down. I mean, she cried actual tears, not crocodile ones. It wasn't dramatic or performative, either. She was quiet, trembling, and visibly struggling to get her words out. Through the tears, she told me that she'd recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. Her therapist had helped her come to terms with it, and apparently, it explained a lot of her behavior over the years. She opened up about how her own mother had been incredibly critical and manipulative when she was growing up. She described a household where love felt conditional, where emotions were used as weapons, and where nothing she did ever seemed to be enough. According to her, she never really learned how to have healthy relationships, especially not with other women. And when Mark and I got married, I unknowingly stepped right into the middle of all that. She admitted point blank that she had always been threatened by my closeness with Mark, that somewhere deep down she was afraid I would steal him away and that she would lose her place in his life. She said she felt like her identity was wrapped up in being his mother, his emotional anchor, and that the idea of him putting someone else first felt like abandonment to her. So, she lashed out in the only way she knew how. She confessed that she had actively tried to make me feel insecure as a wife and a mother. At the dinner party, the one where everything blew up, she admitted it had actually been planned to embarrass me. Her goal was to make me look incompetent in front of family and friends, hoping they'd question my abilities and maybe even side with her more. She said she hated herself afterward, but she just couldn't bring herself to admit it. Then came the part about the fake medical bills. She told me that after the dinner party didn't have the lasting impact she'd hoped for, when people still talked to me, still ate my food, and didn't turn on me, she panicked. She wanted another way to make me look bad. So, she faked the illness and made it seem like my cooking had made her so sick that she needed medical attention. She admitted that she never expected me to actually dig into it or find out the truth. She just assumed we'd pay the bills out of guilt and move on. She said it all spiraled out of control so fast, and by the time I started asking questions, she didn't know how to backpedal. As for the stalking accusations, she admitted those were just a desperate, last-ditch effort. She felt like everyone was starting to see through her lies, and she needed a way to shift the spotlight off herself and make me look unstable instead. She never imagined Patricia would repeat the story to so many people or exaggerate it even further. Throughout all of this, she kept saying how deeply sorry she was. Not in a way that felt rehearsed or defensive, but in a way that actually felt real. She said therapy was helping her slowly unlearn some of the toxic patterns she'd lived with for decades, and that she was committed to making real changes, not just for me or Mark, but for herself, too. She mentioned she was doing something called schema therapy, which apparently is specifically helpful for personality disorders like hers. When she finished talking, I honestly didn't know what to say at first. I sat there kind of stunned. I had come ready for a fight, or at least to stand my ground. I wasn't expecting someone so raw, honest, and broken in front of me. I took a breath and told her that I really appreciated her being so open. I said I could tell how hard it was for her to share all of that, and that it meant something that she was finally taking responsibility. But I also told her the truth, that while I respected her willingness to change, rebuilding trust wasn't going to happen overnight. I couldn't just forget everything that had happened. The lies, the manipulation, the years of subtle digs and emotional chaos. It was all still very real, and it had left scars. I told her that any path forward would have to be slow, and that boundaries would still be in place. She said she completely understood and that she wasn't expecting immediate forgiveness or closeness. She just wanted the chance to keep doing better, even if it took a long time. She then asked if I'd consider joining her for a therapy session at some point in the future. Not right away, but whenever I felt ready. Her therapist thought it could be helpful for both of us. I told her I'd think about it. Before we left, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $2,870, the exact amount of the fake medical bills she had tried to pass off to us. Along with it was a handwritten note where she acknowledged that no amount of money could make up for what she had done, but that she wanted to take this step as a sign of accountability. She wrote that she hoped we might use the money for something positive. Later that night, I told Mark everything. I showed him the check and the note. He was clearly overwhelmed. I could see it in his eyes, this mix of relief, grief, and cautious hope. He said it felt like maybe, finally, there was a real chance for healing. After talking about it, we decided to accept the check and use it toward a family vacation we'd been dreaming about, but kept putting off. It felt symbolic, taking something that started with so much negativity and turning it into something joyful for our kids. Since then, Deborah has shown continued signs that she's serious about changing. She sent a message to the whole extended family admitting that she had never actually gotten food poisoning from my cooking and apologizing for any confusion her health issues may have caused. She's also been very respectful about visits, always calling ahead, never overstaying, and not saying a single critical thing about my cooking, parenting, or anything else. It's honestly been kind of surreal. John even called us the other day to say thank you. He said that since Deborah started therapy, their marriage has improved more than he ever thought possible. He said it feels like he's finally getting to know the woman he fell in love with before all the mental health issues got in the way. Of course, I know this isn't the end of the story. Personality disorders aren't something you fix in a few weeks or months. It's going to be a lifelong process, and I'm sure there will be setbacks. But for now, we're choosing to focus on the progress. We're taking things one day at a time, keeping our boundaries in place, but also letting a little bit of hope back in. And for those who asked whether I was wrong to dig into Deborah's story or whether I should have just paid the fake bills to keep the peace, honestly, I'm so glad I stood my ground. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is hold them accountable. Enabling bad behavior only allows it to continue. Standing firm wasn't easy, but it created the space for real change to begin. Thank you all so much for being part of this journey with me. The support, the advice, the kind words, it all made a huge difference. I've learned so much about boundaries, mental health, and how important it is to protect your peace, even when it's hard. As a final note, Mark and I have decided to accept Deborah's invitation to join her for a therapy session next month. I'm nervous, of course, but I'm hopeful, too. It feels like we're finally on a path towards something healthier and more honest. Not just pretending things are fine, but actually working to make them better. If anything major happens after that session, I might post another update. But for now, thank you again from the bottom of my heart.